Welcome to writingalong.com. Today's episode is all about how to write hyper-realistic dialogue. And that comes just from having actual conversations with people, which I'm sure you do on a daily basis. If not, you have some conversations with people, some form of interaction. It doesn't really matter how much, but you're going to be kind of channeling that exact same energy that you would use when having a discourse with someone, having a dialogue with someone, and just bringing that directly into your writing. You don't want to write dialogue for your book. You just want to write dialogue. You're transcribing a real conversation. If you really want to have dialogue that just, it doesn't stand out as, oh, this is just written, and most readers aren't this harsh. Most people who are going to be reading anything you write or, consuming it in any way don't really care. But if it's just an obsession you have, you can create that experience for your readers, again, simply by, when it comes time for some kind of discourse, some kind of interaction between two characters, really see your characters, visualize your character, put a face to them, put a situation for them, visualize what you're writing about, and see that in your head. Really, you're watching from the outside, and proceed as they would converse. You're a writer, you kind of know where you're going with this already. You're creating things, you're creating spaces, environments, entities, and you're creating people, and those people resemble human beings that you've seen. You're not writing about something you've never seen before. Even if it's something in your imagination, it's a perception, it's a memory, it's something you're kind of amalgamating and bringing to life. So creating conversation is something you should already be capable of doing. In fact, you already are. So I'm not going to dedicate too much time to how to do that. Just trust me on this. You can already do this. So with this visualization of them, seeing them there, the characters, proceed with the conversation they would be having and transcribe it. Take it as you're the person writing down what's being said. You're not exactly creating it. You're not narrating dialogue, right? If we're putting it between two, quotes marks, there's something going on there. It's separate. There's separatism in the best way of using that word within your writing, from what's going on in those little quotes and what's going on outside. Otherwise, you wouldn't have them. You wouldn't use them. And that's why there's in general, best practices, you want to not overuse them if you're not using them for dialogue, because the distinction becomes a little less clear. Overuse isn't really a writing sin. You're not breaking some writing commandment doing it. You might just be doing yourself a disservice. So another way, again, to have highly realistic dialogue is to really only use the quotation marks in this little bracket of dialogue when you need them. Don't just quote everything. Italicizing, don't be afraid to use that if you really want to emphasize something. But even that, it's something you want to use in increments and only for one use case, in this case, dialogue. You can talk about conversations characters are having. You can narrate them. You can just describe what they talked about. And it's actually kind of a cool writing. I don't say this often, but it really is. It's like a writing trick. You don't actually have the whole page long of what they're talking about. You just say, they had discussed this and decided on it. That this conversation happened. And you phrase that in the best way you can. You phrase that in your way, whatever goes with the way your style and your voice. But your reader will be, oh, okay, cool. And it's like you summed up this whole, it could be a 10-minute conversation in just a little sentence. And that's something pretty, it's not advanced, but when your reader encounters that, no matter what genre, I have tons of stuff on genres and what I think about them, but no matter where you're coming from, style, etc., it's powerful. It stands out. It's like one of those moments wow, the writer did this. They summed something up in such a way that I can understand it. They made something easier on me. The plot still continues. It moves forward. But I'm not just, sitting around kicking my feet, just, all right, what next? When are we moving forward? If you don't think your dialogue is thrilling, but it needs to happen, just, again, describe it up. That way, your reader, you put the onus on them. The responsibility is on them, but it doesn't feel like one. It actually feels pretty good to encounter this, because all you do is what you're already doing. The reader's already picturing everything. They're imagining everything as it's happening, as you're describing it. It's like it's playing in the picture tube in their head. Maybe not directly, maybe not consciously, but they're following along what you're saying. So something like that internal process is occurring within them already. And if you sum up a conversation in a little few sentences, maybe one, maybe a paragraph, it's like they're the ones who are making it real based on conversation that they have. So you're actually encountering a relativity, and you're producing that, you're enabling that, and it really prospers. It really works with readers, with your audience. It's something that your audience likes to see every now, would probably like to see every now and then. I'm speaking from giving this advice to writers, and I've seen the effect for them work really excellent. Like they don't use it all the time, but when they do, you know, because I will then, if I'm reading it, put in place faces that I see. I'll put in place a voice that I hear and what I think the conversation would be based on stuff I've really heard in my life, the real interactions I've seen. So it just becomes even more real. So hyperrealistic dialogue, it's not just studying. You're not just studying human behavior. You're not just studying human interaction and digging through psychology books. It's already in you. You're a human being, right? It's like just tapping into what's there. There's a reservoir within you waiting for you to see it, waiting for you to utilize it. And those are two ways to use it. I'll say them again and just kind of briefly go over them. It's even simpler terms. If you really want to use these quotes, like you got one here, one there, right? You're setting a beginning and you're setting an end. You're setting a separation. It's like its own county. It's like its own area, its own place, its own tool, utility, activity, effect. If you're coming from any other kind of artistic background, if you're doing videography, there's some effect you can add. The effect doesn't necessarily alter the story. You can enhance it. That's what I want your dialogue to be seen as too. It's not always the defining, definitive aspect to your story that is, pivoting everything. Sometimes events are outside of human discussion, outside of human control. We talk about things, we make observations, and our words do have real effects on the world. But I mean, I'm not going to speak to this camera right in front of me to shut off. It's going to shut off. I mean, if I have like some smart feature on it, maybe, right? I'm sure that does exist. But I'm not going to, point at something and say, oh, and then it moves. But there's certain intention that comes forth from that, and there is some kind of inherent value in that. But mostly conversations, and especially storytelling, you're just observing what's happening. This and that, and this and that. So with your dialogue, it's very similar. It's a part, but it's not the whole. You don't really see books that are just all dialogue. If you wanted to do that, if you had something in you to just take on some experimental work and produce something like that, by all means, go for it. I'd be interested to read it. Send it to me when you write it. I'd love to see it. I'd probably really enjoy it. But you'll notice if you include even just the tiniest bit of any other narration or first-person perspective, it doesn't always have to be a narrator. I mean, you're aware of that already. I know because if you've come this far in the video, writing isn't foreign to you exactly, right? You know what I'm talking about. With that kind of element and aspect, you're highlighting something else. You're bringing in contrast another, like you could call it a writing device if you want to, but really it's just your style, how you want to bring it forth, how you want to bring it about. Suddenly those little bits of narration that you do have become even more important. If you have a dialogue-heavy chapter, now that's an extreme example, writing a whole book in dialogue. But if you have, very dialogue-heavy scene, part of your writing, like a whole section is just defined by it, just be sure to include some narration on the outside and look at what happens to it. Not just because I'm saying this is what you have to do, but I want you to see for yourself. The effect of it becomes intensified. The little bit of narration that you did include suddenly becomes more powerful. It becomes more highlighted because you have to notice it. It's different. It's something you're not seeing as much. Whereas dialogue, if it's not as common and you're not seeing it as much, it's suddenly like, oh, it's powerful. It doesn't have to be changing everything. This is where it's hard to come up with really intriguing dialogue. It really is consistently. Like by intriguing, I mean something exciting is happening. I need 1 million exciting ideas for this one chapter, not even the whole book, right? if you're doing this, if you're kind of inserting it where you insert, there's a nice little balance to it, and it's within narration and there's separation of it, you'll notice it becomes heightened, it becomes more personal, because it's more apparent. It's more obvious because it's not as you don't see it as much. So when you do see it, again, it becomes profound. It becomes important. And they could be talking about just their day, whatever happened to them. But because it's not foreign, because it's within your book, because you've made that distinction of your dialogue existing separately, it really can have this nice, pleasant effect where it's almost just like a calm, like, wow, it's like a resting period of your narrative, of whatever you're saying. It's like a rest stop, and you can just, dialogue is easy to read. People love to read dialogue. Some people don't. I mean, you can have a conflict of opinion on that. Cool. I mean, that's cool. But for the most part, just people I've talked to, I'm saying this on my own, just experience I've heard. I like reading dialogue. Most people I know like reading it. It's the easiest part of a book to read. And it's pleasant when you find it, when you encounter it. And if you want to write it in a very, very realistic way, again, readers won't hate you if it's not the most realistic, especially always. But visualize the characters, see them in your head. You're already doing that. You're already in that process, and just take it like you're writing down what they're saying, instead of having to come up with it from this narrative perspective. Remember, it is separate. You're making it separate. And if you're not, describe the conversation. It's another very easy, nice way to just kind of sum it up, put it all together. And it's like the power of like an atom. It's tiny. It's not even really visible to the eyes, right? But it's the building block. It's foundational. And your awareness of them doesn't really affect how they still affect the world around us, right? And that's just a word we apply to it. Same thing with all your words too. You're just putting words on top of reality. You're putting words on top of the story and the image already in your head. And you're not just hoping for the best. You're not really just winging it. It's not really about that. It's more or less just telling what's real as best as you can. And writing fiction, what do you mean real? I mean authentically. Let it come. The second you force it, it's not going to be the same. You're never going to write realistic dialogue if you're trying to force it out of you. And this is why I want to make clear these examples I give, these two examples are very, very simple. They don't feel like you're forcing them when you're doing it, once you're there. Give it a try and let me know how it works out for you. And remember, don't fret too much about dialogue. It's important, but in its nature, it's already highlighted. It already becomes contrasted. It becomes more effective depending on the context of where you insert it. Just be aware of dialogue. Don't obsess over it. Check out How to Write a Book in 30 Days. 10-part guide I have on my website at writingalong.com. And I really appreciate you watching this video, checking it out, and tuning in today. I will see you on the next episode of 100 Days of Writing Advice.